Well, good morning, everybody. This is us, as usual. Us, only we forgot to do it last week, so we're sorry, but here we are.
If we had someone to remind us, maybe it would have worked. But when we
Well,
both
we
forget,
theoretically do have
I
someone to
know we should
remind
remind
us.
each other. But then every once in a while, we both forget.
We both
So,
forget.
you
But here
know,
we are, and I think it's interesting as ever. So today I think is unusually interesting, if I may say so. So one of our lives, the most interesting thing about our lives is the way that we have interacted with animals and learned to communicate with them. I think in particular, Maria has very, very natural about that. And I've noticed and written about for years how the way she communicates with the donkeys and now with the sheep and with Zip and with everybody. And she has some really interesting stories to tell. Of course, I'm going to let her tell them. And maybe I kind of one or two of my own, but hers are really special and really recent.
yeah, the one with the one with Zip that just happened was really pretty interesting. So we've been having some mice and rat problems again. They come in this time of year looking for a place to make a nest.
The perfect life.
So they stole all my rice cakes. That's why I was like, okay, they took all
And you
my
were
rice
really
cakes,
pissed
and I
off.
was pissed off about that. So we opened the basement door. We have Bilco doors outside, and we have a door inside the house leading to the basement, right? So I opened the Bilco doors and let Zip into the basement, and he went in there, and he was doing a good job. And so one day I opened the doors, and then as the evening came, I closed them again. I figured, oh, he must be out. And John and I were both upstairs, and we're both working. And I hear this meowing. I hear this little squeaking noise. And I'm like, what is this constant squeak? It was like a constant squeak. And I thought, oh, it must be Zip. And I open up the basement door from upstairs here in the house, and Zip's running down the stairs, meowing. So I follow him down the stairs, and I think he wants to get out. And I go to the basement door, the Bilco doors, and I open those. And the whole time he's meowing, and he just sits there. So I open the door so he can go out, but he doesn't do anything. He just sits there. Then he starts meowing again, and I follow him, and he leads me. He walks through the basement and jumps into the crawl space. And I follow him, and I look in the crawl space, and it's only when I looked at him and I saw him in the crawl space, and he obviously had been eating something. I couldn't see what it was, but he was hunched over and eating something. And it was only when I went and he saw that I saw him there that he stopped meowing. And I thought this was like a great communication. It was complex because I feel like what he was saying is, you have to open the door for me because I'm not staying here all night. So open the basement door. But then when I opened the basement door, he led me. He didn't leave. He led me to his kill, and he wanted me to see. He either wanted me to see that he had caught something, which cats often do, or he wanted me to know that he was going to finish eating and then he'd go out. So don't close that door again. But it was very direct. It was like I had no doubt that he was saying this to me, saying what he wanted. He needed the door open, but he was going to finish eating his meal first. And I just found I had never had that kind of experience with a cat before. That direct. Of this is something is he's definitely trying to tell me something. And he got across what he wanted to tell me,
Maybe you can mention the interaction with the hen, who's talking to you now.
So
You have another hen who's talking.
so we have the two. We had White Hen who recently died, and I had been talking to her. Right, I'm like mimicking her chicken talk. So the other day I'm sitting out on the back porch reading, and one of the hens is on the back porch, and she comes over and she stands right next to where I'm sitting, and she starts talking in the same way. And you see, usually the two younger hens, Kitty Ann, I haven't done this with them. I haven't done that kind of talk with them. But she starts making the same sounds that White Hen used to make, and that we used to trade back and forth. And I thought, oh, she misses White Hen.
And you cried.
And I did cry. But I also have noticed that the two hens And I always used to think they always seem to be together, and now it seems like they're not together a lot. They sometimes are, but they're very often separate. That very often I see one on its own and one in one place and one in another place. And I'm thinking more and more that when I thought Kitty and Anne were the ones who were staying together, that maybe it wasn't because they all look the same. They all look like exactly the same. The only way I could tell White Hen apart was by her feet because they were rougher. That one of the chickens was often with White Hen, and it wasn't the two, Kitty and Anne weren't always together, and that she probably does, miss her company. So she came over to me, and she's doing that chicken talk that I learned from White Hen, and, we're doing it back and forth. And so I started talking to her like that, too.
So the issue is always in those things. This has been a subject of mine for years, writing about it, reading books about it. The thing to remember about communicating with animals is that they're never saying what we think they're saying because we don't know what they're saying, except we can figure it out from what we see. And that's what the biologists, the ones who really understand animals, always say. They don't think like we do, and you can't speak for them because they don't have a vocabulary. But what matters really is what you see, because we don't really know what they're thinking. And maybe someday we will, but we don't know that now. And of course, people who love their dogs and cats love to make them into little kids and think that they know what they're thinking. Oh, he loves me and blah, blah, blah. And I always remember we don't know that. So in the case that we're talking about like now, I could really see some communicating going between those animals and Maria. And Zip in particular, who's very smart and knows us very well. And he was definitely trying to communicate something. But again, you have to remember, not in language. He was doing it in instinct. So he had an animal. He didn't want to leave the animal. He wanted to be able to get out, and he seemed to sense that he had to let us know that. And he also wanted Maria to see or know that he had captured something and was probably eating it in his own delicate way. So there is definitely something really interesting going on there. I was very struck by the way the hen, before she died, the White Hen, when she was being assaulted by her mates, she ran and hid under Maria's chair, which is something I really think is really unusual in something like a chicken. I've had this experience with dogs, especially with Red and Rose, the two dogs that come to mind, where we were thinking the same things in a way. Not literally, but they knew what I wanted and they did what I wanted.
They always seem to just do what you wanted them to do without you even having to say it.
So and they would do it by a number of ways. But the dogs, when they want to communicate, or animals, they look at your eyes, they look at your movement, they look at your tone of voice, listen to your tone of voice, they smell you. They can sense what's going on with you. They can read our moods very, very well. And from that, I think they determine things that they need to do, or that they want to do, or that they want to communicate with you, as Zip was doing. Maria has a very unusual gift because she's a very open person. Her emotions are very open. If she cries as often as most people blink. And not really, it's not in a crying kind of way. It's just part of the way she talks about herself and speaks. So animals pick up that stuff. So she's somebody they can communicate with. I see it in the dung. I see it in all the animals around here. I see it with Asher, who comes up and raises his chin for scratching with her. And when she walks, she doesn't have to yell at them, or we have a dog. Let's go to the pasture, and they all come along with her. That's a level of interaction that's very, very rare. I think it's more common perhaps among farmers who live with animals in this way and who need them, but people with farms. So it's very exciting here to see that, and I think we've been seeing more of it in our lives as we open up to it and know them better, and also in my case, become more open to the idea.
I think too. I mean, we communicate with the animals around us all the time, often without even knowing that we're doing it, and we're doing things either in our repetitive actions or in they're feeling our emotions, and they're behaving in a way that that we're reinforcing, even if we aren't really aware of it. That goes on. I mean, I think when you started to see it in me is the first time I realized that it was happening. When you started to see it in me with the donkeys, I never thought about it. I just did it. And then when you recognized it, when you started taking pictures, and then when I looked at the picture, I was like, oh yeah. And then when I thought about it, I thought, there is something that goes on between us. But I never really, I never really thought about it. And I bet that happens all the time with people and animals. And like you said, especially with farmers and their animals, because they're really close to them. They can't not be.
You remember that incident with Rose? I thought was very relevant before. In Hebron.
Yeah, when you were taking a picture of one of my. This was very early on, and John was taking a picture of one of my quilts. It was hanging out on one of the feeders in one of the pastures, and the sheep were out there, and Rose was out there, and John wanted the sheep he said, oh, it would be great to have the sheep by the quilt, and it was like Rose immediately brought the sheep around, and there they were,
and held them there,
and held them by the quilt, and you didn't ask her. You didn't, you said it to me, I think, maybe, but she just knew, and she just did it. That's the first time I saw that, and I was like, oh, there's something's going on there.
when Maria is sitting with the donkeys, she'll sit down near them, and they come to her, which is always a smart thing to do with animals. And they just lean into each other.
Yeah.
And you can see something's going on back and forth. And when they're done, they go away, and you know that they're done. And when you're not done, they stay. And there's definitely something happening.
Well, you can feel it. I mean, I can
see it.
You can see it. I mean, you have seen it before. I have felt it, but you have seen it. And I didn't really think about it. Once I became conscious of it, then it, changed a little. I thought, okay, this is, what's going on here. I started to think about it.
Well, I see it every day with you, so it's very helpful to me to learn about this. And I felt it most with the dogs, especially the therapy border collies, who were incredibly intuitive about people. Ren would come into the mansion, and he would look around, and he would spot people who did want to see him and who didn't want to see him. And he never went near the people who didn't want to be near a dog, and went intuitively to the people who did. And would get close enough so they could pet him and touch him. When they were done, he would move away. I never had to teach him this. I never had to point or command it to it. I did praise him when he went to the people. I mean, you have to teach the border collies the work of the people and not sheep. But they get that right away. And we get to live with these dogs all day. Now we're seeing a lot of it with Zip, who he sits with me every day when I go out to take flower pictures. And when I don't want to be bothered, he leaves me alone.
Or he just sits there with
Or he just sits there.
He doesn't bother. It's like in my studio, the animals with my quilts that are laying on the floor, they never walk on them.
And no dog in my study ever moves an inch when I'm writing. I mean, I never had to tell them not to do it. None of them.
That's the kind of thing where I said I think some of it happens. We do it without even knowing we're doing it.
And it's always the struggle to separate instinct from purpose. People are very drawn. They lose sight of the fact that animals don't have our language, so I think we have continued to study this and think about it and talk about it, and it's very exciting.
We kind of live it, and we have these experiences, and then it's like, like when that happened with Zip, I was like, wow, you can't believe what just happened with Zip. It's kind of exciting.
Well, we're at 13 minutes.
We better stop.
Well, this is a great topic, and I think it's good for us to go back to it because we're learning more and more is happening, and we're more perceptive about it.
The more you think about it, the more you see.
It's one of the most fascinating things, I think, about being around animals, when you can really learn. And none of my dogs will go near the road. And that was extremely mental communication. Yeah. And anyway, we could talk about that some more. But we are here, and we missed last week,
but we'll be back again.
We'll do 4 times next week just to make up, as you can think. Well, thank you for surviving us and listening to us. We appreciate it, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.